are not required. So we tell that's very different from R1. So it is expected that the award will enable the PIs to start a productive independent research career and have a significant impact to the field. The investigator is expected to devote almost exclusive effort. I think in the program you've already heard that you need to spend the percentage of time on this research. And you should use the BioSketch and letter of reference. They are very critical resources for the reviewers to evaluate the prospect and promise of your career. And institutional support, again, is very, very important. We want to know how your institute is supporting your thing, whether you have a group that will help you, whether you have the appropriate lab space or that issues, all those issues, okay? Now, stage 2 review, now once we finish the stage 1 review, those will go on to a stage 2 review, which is what we call editorial board. The editorial board is a group of senior researchers. They will do a second review. What they do is each of them will get about 20 applications, and they will read your applications and will read the stage 1 review. So they'll look at both your application and the review, and then they will score each application using a 1 to 9 scale score. And they will be, after they review them in January, then they will meet in February to select the finalists, about 25 to 30, depends on the number. And then these people will be invited to Washington, D.C. for an interview, and then the editorial board will meet with these finalists to do the interview. So the board consideration, what do they consider? They consider is principal investigator an exceptional individual with the scientific creativity and intellectual sophistication to launch and accelerate an independent research career. Now, this is the investigator. You see the theme there. We are emphasizing on investigator. And second point is we emphasize on the environment or the institutional support. So has the host institution committed to providing the principal investigator scientific freedom, ample resources, collaborating faculties, and protected time to develop an independent research program? And of course, we want to see whether your project is meritorious, whether the project you are proposing to do will have any impact to the field. That's all I need to say. I'll welcome any questions. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Risha. All right. So if you have any other questions, there's some contact information on this last slide. And feel free to reach out to us. All right. So now we're going to turn to your questions that you have submitted ahead of time. These are the ones that you submitted to our Early Independence mailbox. We have them broken down by general topic. But once again, if you have any questions that you think of during this webinar, please type them into the Q&A box off to the side, and we will be sure to get to those. And just so that you know, this webinar is being recorded, and anything that you say, I think on the chat feature, people will be able to see your name if you write that, but they will not be able to see your questions that you submit, just so you're aware of that. Okay, so Dr. Basavappa is going to start us off, and we're going to be discussing some questions about institutions.
Thank you, Becky. So the first question is, how can I find an institution willing to support me? Well, the NIH does not help facilitate or make matches between potential applicants and host institutions. The onus is on the applicant. So potential applicants may approach an institution to ask them to be a host, or institutions that may be interested in sponsoring, or candidates may reach out to them. So again, NIH, we did have a portal a few years ago, but that didn't work out as well as we intended. So the responsibility of the host and institution to find each other is on the host and on the applicant, and the institution is on the applicant and the institution. And again, only 2 applications per institution are allowed. This make sure that the institution is really behind the applicant in terms of the support. The next question is, what type of position does the institution need to provide to me? There are several types of appointments that would fulfill the requirement of scientific and administrative independence, including research staff, adjunct faculty, and assistant professor. So we really don't specify the type of position that should be provided. Just to clarify, so although an applicant cannot be functionally independent at the time of application, the investigator can be functionally independent at the time of award. So if you've already made arrangements to become functionally independent, but the start date of that appointment would begin after the application is submitted, then that's totally fine with us. You would still, in that regard, you would remain eligible for the Early Independence Award Program. So we expect that the investigator will control the budget of the award along with the space, resources necessary to conduct the funded research project. So the awardee, whatever official capacity or official title that the awardee has, he or she should be totally able to control the scientific agenda of his or her own research program, to control the budget for the award, and the position typically will confer eligibility to apply for other sorts of grants and other types of research support. And to help further this, the application must include a written commitment to an independent research position that will be activated no later than the start date of the award. We also expect that the position should not involve significant teaching or administrative requirements. Again, in the first 2 years, 80% of the effort should be toward the Early Independence Award Research Project. In subsequent years, in years 3, 4, and 5, 80% of the effort should be toward independent research, but the source of support for that independent research need not come just from the Early Independence Award, or other sources of research support are fine. Okay. The next question is, are position appointment types viewed equally during the review, or is one type of appointment preferred? The reviewers are asked, well, the answer to this is that the reviewers are asked to evaluate the scientific environment that the institution will provide, along with the facilities and the resources, rather than the position alone. The reviewers really focus on what the situation will be that the awardee would have, and not really what sort of title that he or she would have. What resources does the institution need to provide to me? Well, again, it's expected that the awardee will have independent research space, will have the infrastructure to execute the research, and access to core facilities or other types of institutional resources. The institution may provide full or partial salary support. This is quite often the case. And the institution is expected to integrate the awardee into the faculty environment, such that he or she is really part of the scientific community, part of the research enterprise. What would a successful institutional support package look like? That varies quite a bit from application to application. But the reviewers have to be convinced that the institution really is behind the application and the applicant, and is willing to make sure not only that the appropriate infrastructure is provided, but also that there will be an appropriate mentoring structure to make sure that there is a safety net for the people. You know, the awardees are expected to walk the tightrope by themselves, but there should be it should be clear to the reviewers that there will be people there forming a safety net, just to make sure that if something doesn't go as planned, that the reviewers that the awardees can get back on the tightrope and start walking again. How are institutions identified with the 2 application limit? We make that definition based on DUNS number, Dun and Bradstreet unique identifier. So, for example, some institutions, the medical school may have its own DUNS number. In other institutions, the medical school may be part of the university such that it doesn't have a unique DUNS number, but our definition is that each entity that has a unique DUNS number can submit up to 2 applications.
Okay, and there was a question asking about recommendations for reaching out to institutions to finding one that will support you.
I skipped that question. But
okay, sorry.
Okay, so what is what recommendations do you have in terms of where to begin reaching out to institutions and what information to provide them about the award? Well, typically this happens through networking. You may, through your interactions with colleagues at other institutions, may know of institutions that might be willing to sponsor early independence awardees. So it's best to reach out to them through, for example, through department chairs, of the chairs of the most appropriate departments. I would also recommend that you contact the research office at the institution, because the grants research office, for example, will often know about the Early Independence Award program and what the institution has in place for vetting applications and what internal process has been established. So reaching out to the grants research office is often a good idea. You may also wish to stay at your own institution. That happens as well, but in terms of establishing independence, it's often a good idea to make sure that there is some formal distance between you and your current mentor. For example, an appointment in a department that's different from the one that you're currently in would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. All right. So those are the questions that we received beforehand. The next topic that we'll be discussing is eligibility. Okay. All right, so I will be talking about those then. So for eligibility, we've had a question on why is the non-independent research position described functionally rather than by title? And Ravi actually hit on this before. And this is done because there are so many different titles to positions that could actually be, the same title could actually have very different functionalities. And so in order to do this, make it more fair and to be more clear, we actually identify non-functional, the non-independent by actual functions of that. And as Ravi talked about that quite a bit in his presentation, so I will leave it there. But yes, it's just more fair that way. All right. We also have a question on, so can you describe the characteristics of the non-independent research position? Okay, in greater detail. So we will talk about this. So in order to be considered non-independent, you need to have your current research agenda set through the concurrence with mentors. So that means that you cannot go off willy-nilly onto your own research project without having discussed this with somebody ahead of time who can give you permission to go down that route. Also, your research is going to be funded primarily through support to other investigators. So this is going to be that you don't have your own funding coming in from major sources. The university isn't providing you with major sources of money either, but instead you are working with a mentor who is primarily funding your research. And mentored fellowships such as the NIH F31 or 32 fellowships, or even NSF graduate research fellowships do not preclude your eligibility for this. You also cannot have any research space assigned to you directly from the institution for your research. so you can't have an established lab. And you also cannot apply for an NIH R01 without a special waiver or exemption from the institution based on institutional policy. So this means that whatever position you're in, you have to actually go out and seek the special permission from your institution if you want to apply for an R01 to get that institution to submit your application. Okay, I think those are the highlights. Did I miss anything, Ravi?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay. The next question that we have is about postdocs. Can postdoctoral fellows apply for the award? Yes, postdocs can apply for the award, but you cannot have served as a postdoc for over 12 months. And if you're in medicine, then that means that you cannot have served as a fellow for 12 months as well. And this is NIH policy on how they actually define their early stage investigator status. Like some of those criteria also apply to this. And that they decided that postdoctoral training and the clinical fellowships, that it's additional training that if you were coming straight off with your your PhD, that you would be at an unfair advantage. So yes, you can apply, but there's a 12-month window. And this holds if even you got a degree, maybe you were a postdoc for 13 months and then you went back and got another degree, that those previous 13 months do count towards your postdoc and would preclude you from this award. All right, another question is how much time should be dedicated to the award project? And Ravi also touched on this, but you're expected to commit at least 9.6 person months, which comes out to be about 80% of your effort, needs to be dedicated to your Early Independence Award project for the first 2 years. And then in the final 3 years, you can reduce your effort, but you have to put in at least the 9.6 person months towards independent research in general. So if you have other grants or things that can count towards your independent research, but at least for the first 2 years of this award, you need to commit the 9.6 months per year. All right, any other eligibility? I think there were online. Let me check real quick. Let's see, I graduated in December of 2016 with my PhD and in an assistant professor position for 4 months. Depending on what your position. Okay, Dr. Nee can answer this.
Because you are already an assistant professor, you will not be eligible for this DP5 application.
Because that typically would mean that you also would be eligible to apply for an R01 or R01 equivalent. As a tenure track faculty member, you would be setting your own scientific agenda, so you would not be not functionally independent.
All right, we also have a question. Can applicants accept offers from established independent fellowship programs before the application deadline?
Yes, but that appointment cannot become active before the submission date.
Okay. All right. See, also, what are the restrictions in terms of pursuing the award as a postdoc? We touched on that already. Just can't have served within that over 12 months. Okay. And there's another question about, does part-time research during residency count as postdoctoral experience?
No, it does not.
Okay.
In fact, that's how many residents gain the research experience to make them competitive with the program.
Okay, and then there's another question about postdoctoral position. So if I completed my PhD in September of 2016 and immediately started the position on September 1st. Am I eligible to apply if I submit before September 1st of 2017? And yes, it's based on the 12-month window. So if you, no, this is for postdoc. So I say yes, you are eligible. Yeah, you are eligible.
But the cutoff date is given in the FOA, so check that to make sure.
Okay. So there's another question. I received my PhD in May of 2017 and will join as an institute as an assistant professor. Am I eligible? It's soon join. It depends on when you are beginning your position. Once again, you need to make sure that you submit your application before you accept any position that would negate those, that would violate the non-independent research position. Okay. So eligibility. And if you have further questions, we will do our best to get to them. All right, so moving on, application and submission questions, and Dr. Nee will also help us here.
Okay, there's a question about whether the research strategy portion of the application included 10 subsections, like rationale for admitting a postdoc and approach. How much of the 12 pages should be allocated to each of these sections? I would say this is your call. When we review the application, you have 12 pages on the research strategy, and in a normal review, we will evaluate them based on the significance, the innovation, and the approach. So you need to make sure that what you write in there, what you put in there, will allow the reviewers to comment on these points. Yeah, the question is whether they should be equally weighted or should be emphasizing. As I said again, this is research strategy section. It is a little bit different from R1 because R1 doesn't have the 10 subsections. But whatever you put in there, when I instruct the reviewers, I actually gave them like, okay, for investigator section, you would look at subsection, A, C, D, or something like that. I don't mean those specific numbers, but that's how we deal with it, okay? Second question, should section D of the PI biosketch address research support or scholastic achievement? Definitely. You need to use that section to put in anything that you've done to contribute to science. The more you have, certainly the more will bolster your qualifications. Is there a page limit to the facilities and other resources section? There's no page limit on that. Next question, can pre-doc or prior mentor be collaborators on the project proposal, or is this seen as a sign that the applicant is unprepared for this type of an award and needs further training? So you actually partially answered your own question. Yes, you can include anybody on your project who could be your co-investigators or could be collaborators, but it is very important that this is an early independence award. So you need to establish that you are in control, you are the driver, and anybody else is to assist you. There were applications in the past that it looks like this applicant is just continuing what mentor was doing or what he was doing for the mentor, and that's not a good application, because that does indicate that you still need more training. So the key is that this should be your project. It should be your independent research going forward.
Thank you. All right, we have some that are online for you as well. So given that each application is considered a new application, are prior applications or reviewer comments made available?
No, because this is a new application, so there's no prior application or review comments for this particular application. So nothing would be shown to the reviewers for whatever you applied before.
Okay. Are we able to submit other career development applications while the DP5 is under review, or should we wait until a final decision is made?
So you can't have substantially the same application being considered through two different, substantially the same project being considered simultaneously through two different applications. You need to wait for the summary statement of one to be released before you can apply for the other.
Okay. And another question, looking at prior successful applications, most awards seem to be basic science oriented. Would this funding mechanism be appropriate for public health type projects?
Yes. there seems to be no bias for or against any particular area of science. Anything within the broad mission of NIH is welcome. We don't get as many behavioral type or applications as we do basic science applications, but actually the fraction of such research is actually greater than in the typical portfolio.
Yeah, I would agree with Ravi on this. If you look at other projects on the Common Fund initiatives, DP5 has the most behavioral research applications. Each round, about a third of the applicants were from behavioral science or clinical. They're non-basic science applications. So it does have a large portion. And also we have people who submit very clinical applications from MDs, and we encourage that.
Okay, great. All right. The RFA states that substantial preliminary data are not expected, but is it still okay if I include some, or does it hurt my application?
Yes, if you have preliminary data, you can certainly include it, and it will help you if it's very strong. But understanding that if you submit preliminary data, then it's fair game for evaluation. So if the data is very weak and it doesn't support your project, and it may weaken your application. But we would hope that you would include the data that really is helpful rather than hurtful.
Right. And does the applicant need to identify a mentor in their particular research area of interest as a part of the application?
I would say if you have a general mentor, that is fine, but remember, this is not a training grant. It's not a K award. It's not a fellowship award. It's an independent award. So you are the principal investigator. The mentor would be in the general sense of mentoring you as a junior faculty, but it's not, if you put somebody, as I alluded before, if it looks like you are still under the tutelage of somebody else, you're not independent, then this will certainly hurt your application.
All right. And how much emphasis is placed on risky or outside-the-box research topics in the review? Oh, that's in the review, but also application.
How much risk? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
How much emphasis is placed on risky or outside-the-box research topic in the review? Well, we expect the applicants to be truly exceptional people who already at their career stage established a pretty substantial record of achievement. Maybe not publications, since they're just finishing up their PhD or just entered their postdoctoral fellowship, but their letters of reference can allude to the quantity and quality of work that they've already established. So going forth, we expect that these types of applicants will propose something that's bold and something that would represent a leap for the field as well as for themselves. And so being bold is involves some inherent risk.
I would echo that. We've seen applications that are very bold. You know, remember, innovation is one of the criterion that we evaluate, right? In the past, we've seen very unique applications, and reviewers really like that. There was one on squid eye, and it's very unique. I believe it was supported. And then there are also anecdotally people review will single out an applicant who is doing things that nobody else is doing out there, but it's very innovative, and reviewers said we should give them a chance. So really this is emphasized.
So to follow on that, the squid eye application has already been submitted, so please don't submit any more applications on squid. I'm just teasing.
No, but it is a good point that we do seek to diversify our own program portfolio. So it is something that we look at. All right, another question. Are co-investigators allowed or only paid or non-paid consultants?
Yes, you can have co-investigators that do receive some level of funding, but remember, but you have to use that judiciously. This is the funding will be to drive your research program, and you have to consider the level of effort that other people will require and whether or not that's justified by them getting some support.
Okay. Let's see what else. All right. I think that's good for the application submission, and we'll be going back over the Q&A box that you are submitting your questions at after we go through this next section then. All right, so now we're moving along to budgets. And see, Dr. Basavappa.
What is the salary guidance for early independence positions? We really don't have any guidance. Whatever is appropriate for that institution and for the position that the awardee would have is fine. There is a congressionally mandated salary cap of $187,000 for salary, and I don't expect that any of you will request that much in salary, or at least I hope not. The budget, remember, should include project expenses like personnel, supplies, equipment, subcontracts, and other allowable costs.
And a question, should we use a modular budget format?
Yes, since the award level is $250,000 in direct costs per year, that qualifies as a modular budget.
And another question, how much of the applicant's effort should be covered by the DP5 budget and how much by the institution?
That varies quite a bit from application to application. The reviewers will look at how committed the institution is to the applicant. Sometimes that takes the form of salary support, sometimes it's not, but both ways the application can still be considered to be strong.
Okay. All right. I think that's mostly on budget. Okay. Next, we'll be talking about letters of reference. And Dr. Nee, could you lead us through that? Are they okay?
So the first question is, who should I ask for a letter of reference? So referees should be able to address the candidate's the scientific leadership and management skills, and how the PI is qualified to conduct successful independent research. So it may not be able to choose referees based on primarily on their official position, such as your department chair or institution lead. Okay, so basically you can ask anybody to write write letters of reference for you. Anybody who could testify that you are an outstanding person and you can certainly do the independent research. And it can be anybody, mostly from outside of your institution. That's important because if you just have your mentor or your PhD advisor to write it, then it's not, they certainly know you, but it would be good if you have outside people to write references for you. I saw one question about, I've worked with investigators based on foreign institutions with no NIH funding records. Is it okay to include letters from them? I would say yes. You can certainly have anybody who can evaluate you to send in reference letters.
And I might add to that, just to elaborate on what Dr. Nee said, I think also it may not be a good idea to have letters of reference from people who are invested in the outcome of the review, for example, chairs or deans, or people who have strong collaborations with you. They may not be the best to write letters of reference.
So Ravi actually just answered the second question, that is, what's the difference between a letter of reference and a letter of support? So the letter of reference would be somebody outside that will evaluate your ability and your promise, but not have immediate invested into your project. While the letter of support will certainly be somebody who will support your project, will collaborate with you, they're vested in your project. So that might be the difference between those two.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, and now we're going on to review, which also is Dr. Nee. Can you talk a bit more about review?
Yeah, I think in my brief remark at the opening, I've answered most of these questions, but I just quickly reiterate some of them. Who reviews my application? There will be subject matter experts in stage 1. So what we do is when your application comes in, and we'll look at your application to see what it is about. It is about cancer, it is about diabetes, or it is about basic science and cell biology and stuff like that. And then we'll send this application to the study section that reviews those kind of applications. And then the SROs from that study section will recruit reviewers specifically for your application. So they're very expertise centered. So those will be your first stage reviewers. And then for the second stage review, we have broader vision scientists who will not be going into very detail of your application, but look at your application on the broader level, like how you can be a leader in the field and how your institution is going to support you based on the detailed review, how the scientific merit there is in your application. So those are the people who are going to review your application. Second question, what will reviewers focus on most? What type of criteria are used to access the applicants? Again, as I said, we are going to use the standard review criteria, which is the 5 criteria and the overall impact criterion. So, and then also we're concentrating on the investigator, that is you, and certainly the number of applications, history of being successfully funded as using like a pre-doc or post-doc application. Those will certainly be very helpful. And also we concentrate on the institutional support. Third question, will a subject expert review my application? The answer is yes, I just covered that. Last question is, what should my talk focus on during the interview? The project or my qualification. So this would be the second stage. Once we go through the first stage of review, if you are selected as a finalist to come for interview, I will have more instructions for you as an interviewee on how you're going to present and what we are looking for in the interview. Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, now we just have some questions from the Q&A box. So from a previous funding cycle, is it possible to provide an estimate of the funding pay line, so to speak? Like, what's the success rate for this funding mechanism?
We don't have a strict pay line, and it varies. The number of applications that we get from year to year varies quite a bit. And also the institutions can submit to only 2 applications. So it's hard to say what the overall success rate is because there's a limit on how many applications the institutions can submit. But if we consider only the submitted applications, then the Common Fund provides most of the funding funds most of the awards that are made. And for the Common Fund supported awards, the Common Fund uses the priority score for funding most of the awards or for choosing most of the awards, but the Common Fund does set aside part of the available funds to support applications based on our programmatic priorities. In addition, the various component institutes of NIH have the opportunity to fund applications of interest to them. So the short answer is there's really no pay line.
But if you do want to see like the past success rates for NIH in general, you can go on to NIH Report, and they have in their statistics book, they'll have that information for DP5. You can look that up there.
That's very true.
All right. Next question. The question about, is there a central institutional review board, and are we able to propose a specific scientific review group or expertise on the cover letter?
Okay, let me take up this question. I don't really know what you're talking about, Central Institutional Review Board. Is it IRB Approval Board, which is totally different kinds of review? But in our scientific review, you can go to the CSR website. We have 24 integrated review groups, and we have over 180 scientific review groups within those integrated group. So if you go there, you can Google and you can search for the subject matter of the application and see which group might be the group that can review your application. So that way you can certainly make your recommendation and suggestions to see where your application would have fall into the group if it were an R1. And from then on, we can certainly try to direct your application to the expertise in that group.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next question. Is it possible to change institutions between the time of application and time of appointment?
Yes, it is. And the timing of that actually depends on the ramifications of that change of institution depend on when that change occurs. If it occurs relatively early in the review process, then the reviewers would need to assess the sort of support being provided by the new institution. If the change in institution occurs later, for example, just before the award is made, then there would be a programmatic review to make sure that the new host institution would be providing the level of support and commitment that the original host institution had described in the application.
Okay, and then there's a follow-up question about biosketches. A question about whether Section B should address research support or scholastic achievement.
I would say both. If you have any achievements, you have made any contribution to the science, you can be included in that section.
Yeah, but getting the 4.0 may not be.
All right. Yeah, there's another question about how many applications we receive every year. We are not allowed to give out that information, but once again, if you go to the NIH report, you can look up statistics on the success rate for DP5. Let's see. All right, another question. It appears that many applicants will be without a faculty position. Does applying with a particular institution bias one's faculty position acceptance to the host institutions? Yeah. So the award is transferable, as Ravi was talking about, but once again, it will be based on NIH policy and procedure and making sure that the institution is still, the new one is suitable for your award.
Right. So yeah, so after the award is made, it's the award can be transferred to another institution. Remember though that the DP5 award is made to the institution, not to the investigator. So the original host institution must be willing to relinquish the award so that it can be transferred to another institution, and that's never been a problem. So I don't expect that will be a problem in the future. And it's not uncommon for DP5 awardees to change institutions during their award period.
All right, there's another question asking about staying at the same institution at which you were trained. How does a postdoc position fit in there if you're submitting the grant from the institution where you recently became a postdoc?
Yeah, the same sort of considerations and cautions apply. But maybe not as much since you most likely have just joined that particular institution where you're doing a postdoc, and so you're not as firmly entrenched in the culture. But it should be clear to the reviewers that you would be quite separate from your postdoc mentor when you pursue your own research program. And often this is done by having an appointment. This is done formally by having an appointment in another department.
Okay. I think last question here. So besides allowing the applicant to be independent and being willing to collaborate with the applicant, what else will reviewers be looking for that the institution can provide?
Well, the institution can provide a lot of help, not just that they're willing to collaborate. Certainly that's part of it. You should have a strong faculty support, and also institutions will, usually what I see in the applications that they've agreed to provide lab space, provide administrative support, and all kinds of things that the institutions will show that the institution is committed to your career, to your success in that institution. So that's multifaceted.
All right. All right, and then another question, what's the meaning of the describe the process and criteria used to select the PDPI section?
That refers to the internal process that your institution has used to select the up to two applications that can go forward. It doesn't refer to the NIH process and criteria, but to choose the two applications, up to two applications, but the internal institution process and criteria used.
Okay, and then another question, if you have a pending K08 application, can I still apply? The aims would be different from the DP5.
Yes, because the K, as long as they're scientifically distinct, and the K award is a mentored research award.
Yes, and I encourage you to go onto the NIH website on the grants page. They have a really good page describing what early stage investigator status and new investigator status mean, and what grants, what type of awards are exempt from this new investigator status. So if the K awards and F fellowships are exempt, and if you go to that page on the grants.gov, it actually has a list of all the awards that are exempt. All right. All right, and then one more question on the letter of intent. What is that, and is that something the institution, is that from the institution?
The letter of intent is just to let us know that you're intending to apply. It's not required and it's not binding. If you don't need to submit a letter of intent to apply, and if you do submit a letter of intent, you're not obligated to follow through and submit an application. We ask only for very limited information, your name, for example, and the title of the project. And that information is used primarily to help in the review process, to help us anticipate the number of applications that we might get, as well as in what scientific areas.
Okay. And we have received some other questions online, but they're very specific for people's situations. So I encourage you to actually submit that to our award mailbox. So via email, please send that to me, and I will answer that offline. We have some privacy considerations, so we'll do that offline. All right, but I think those are the last questions that we have. If we missed yours, I apologize, but please go ahead and email our mailbox again, and we will be sure to answer them offline. All right, thanks you all for attending, and we will be posting the slides that were presented today, as well as the Q&A portion of this webinar. All right, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody. Well done, Becky. It's hard to, go up and down.
I know.
Yeah.